Well, it feels like I just did one of these videos, but we're already at the end of February, and that means that it's time for another quick project update video. Alright, so the whole point of these videos is to catch people up on what I've been working on in the previous month, show you some stuff that I've got coming up soon, and update you on some things that other people within the community have been working on. These videos are meant mostly for people who don't follow along on social media, but even if you do follow along, there's some new stuff in here and maybe a few things that you missed as well. So I'll start with the Minty Pie Light. That's something that I've been getting asked about a lot recently, and I get why. We announced that thing several months ago at this point. We just ran into a few snags along the way. For example, the screen that we were going to use, it's no longer even being made, so we had to find a replacement for that. And to make matters worse, with the coronavirus outbreak there in China, any communications with them has been slowed down drastically. Everything just kind of came to a halt over there. It's been kind of crazy. But it looks like things are getting back on track at this point, and we're anticipating to have this available for people within the next month or so. The biggest question that I've been getting about it is what the differences are between version 3 and the Minty Pie Light. So the biggest differences are the screen. For one thing, we're using a 2.4-inch screen similar to what we had on version 2. Remember, the whole point of this thing is to make it much cheaper and more accessible for more people. We've also removed the lid sensor. We took out the power button, and that's been replaced with an actual power switch, but it still has USB Type-C charging. The battery, you don't have to use the Minty Pie battery for it if you don't want to. You can use a regular LiPo if you want to put a smaller, cheaper one in there. But you can still put the connectors on there and use the official Minty Pie battery with it as well. Headphone jack has also been removed, and you'll notice that there's no more wiring harness with connectors. You'll have to manually connect some wires between these two boards. So Helder removed those features to make his parts cheaper, and then I'm working on figuring out what options I'm going to have available for the 3D printed parts to make those cheaper as well. I've been working on updating the 3D printed parts to make them work with the new screen and everything, and one update in particular I'm really excited about. Those pegs that are on the back of the bezel that have been there for the last few versions of the Minty Pie. Those could be pretty fragile, especially if you were trying to remove the bezel to maybe, I don't know, reseat a ribbon connector or something like that. So what I did for this version, I basically just kind of stretched them out into a pill shape to give them a lot more surface area for the layers to adhere to one another. And I've been amazed at how much of a difference that made. I've done several tests, some of them with some really tight tolerances, and none of them broke off when I inserted them and removed them. So yeah, it should be much more durable. So aside from those things, it's pretty much the same Minty Pie, just again, much cheaper than it has been in the past. Hopefully make it more accessible for more people. Next up, the giant Gameboy. This is something that I didn't get to make nearly as much progress on this month as I had wanted to, but I tried a couple of things that came out pretty cool. So I was redoing the A and B buttons in the resin printer on the Photon to make them much smoother than they are with the FDM versions. And I'm still pretty new to this type of printing, but from what I've seen so far, color options are much more limited than they are with FDM printers using filament. So I found these dies from a company called Monocure 3D, and they're dies made specifically for light sensitive resin that you use in these kinds of printers. I started with a vat of white resin and added a few drops at a time to try and match the color of the buttons on the DMG of the original Game Boy. It's not a perfect match, I might still tweak it just a little bit, but it came out way better than I was expecting. I've got a couple of smaller projects that I'm working on that I'm not quite ready to show off just yet, but here's a sneak peek. Here's one that I'm working on for the Nintendo Switch Lite. I'll leave it to you to try and guess what it is, but keep an eye on Instagram and Facebook and you'll see some updates there. If not, then you'll see it in next month's update. I've also been working on a build video for Kite's Circuit Shield. This is the board that he made for the Game Boy Pocket. I showed it off in last month's update. I'll hopefully have that video out in the next week or so, and he's actually got pre-orders open right now for the Circuit Shield, as well as his Circuit Sword boards for the original Game Boy and the Circuit Gem for the Sega Dreamcast VMU. So if you've been wanting to get your hand on one of those, now's your chance before someone buys them all up. Also been working on some custom parts to make putting the Circuit Shield together easier, like this laser cut acrylic screen alignment bracket. It's super accurate and just slides over the screw posts, lines everything up perfectly so you don't have to fiddle with that or eyeball it. It just slides right in there. I don't even think that it needs glue. I still need to finish assembling it to make sure, but yeah, it seems to hold everything in place really nicely. I also made some X and Y button wells to hold the buttons in place and keep them from spinning around. I printed them in resin so they're super smooth and precise. None of that scratching against the layer lines that you typically get with 3D printed button wells. So yeah, I'll have those available soon, as well as STL files for you to print your own if you want. And as usual, those will go to Patreon supporters first, and then for everybody else to download later on. Elder's got another project coming out in the next month or so that I wanted to mention. It's a new version of his retro PSU, and it's got a lot of really cool features to it. First of all, it has 2 outputs, each one of them able to supply 3 amps. But you can actually tie both of those together to get a full 6 amps of current out of it, which is frankly just a crazy amount. It'll let you power like a Raspberry Pi 4 and a screen no problem. It should even be able to handle things like an Odroid XU4. I haven't been able to test that just yet. But this is what I'm going to be using in the giant Gameboy project, so that I'll be able to put a big 8-inch LCD in there, as well as a Raspberry Pi 3B Plus, maybe even a Pi 4, I haven't made up my mind yet. And it should be able to run everything no problem. And it even had some nice features like an analog to digital converter, so that you could easily add analog sticks to your build if you wanted to. It's got a USB Type-C connector for charging, which is nice to see. The pins along the side here are the right width apart so that you can plug them into a breadboard if you want to. And then this JSD battery connector is actually perforated so you can snap it off if you don't need to use it. There are a few jumpers on here so that you can enable that second output that I mentioned before, as well as tie both of those together to get more current. So yeah, tons of flexibility in this board. I'm excited to start using in projects going forward. All right, well, I think that about covers the last month. It doesn't seem like I got like a ton done on one project in particular, but instead I got a little done on a bunch of different projects, which I guess it just goes that way sometimes. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Huge thanks to my Patreon supporters. Their names will be at the end of the video as usual, and I'll see you guys next time.